Hey everybody, Christian here, and today I'd like to show you the fastest and the best way to set up a Linux VPS, a virtual private server for web hosting. Because I'm planning to deploy a new website for myself in the next months, so I thought, why not take you along the journey and document the whole project in some videos. My plan for running the web server is to partner with today's sponsor Hostinger, where you can easily set up a public Linux VPS in just a few seconds. Before you ask why I don't set it up on the Proxmox server in my home lab, well, my home lab is great for experimentation and testing, but I'm not really running it 24/7. So on the weekends or when I'm on vacation, which happens sometimes, honestly, not as often as I wish, but yeah, when it happens, I like to shut down my servers. But of course, for my public website, I need an infrastructure that's running all the time, regardless of what I'm doing at home. So that's why I picked Hostinger. They have some great options for that and deal with all the hardware stuff and the virtual servers for me. Still, I'd like to be in control when it comes to the installation and the application deployment, because I just love to do that. And I think it will be interesting for you to see if you'd like to set up your own little website or whatever web project you'd like to work on. So let's get started. Alright guys, so before we jump right into installing the server and deploying everything, I'd like to show you the project plan that I've developed for today, so that gives you a better understanding of how the different components that we're using in this tutorial work in combination and how things come together. So first, I'm deploying a new server that I call Server Production 12. Yeah, I'm actually using 12 servers right now in my entire deployment, 11 systems in my home lab, and the 12th one will be on the Hostinger infrastructure that I give a fully qualified domain name serverproduction12.cloud.crave.de. So because I'd like to differentiate my home environment from the public cloud environment that I'm going to set up. Also, I will install a pre-built image on the Hostinger VPS that is running Docker. So this is a Linux distribution based on Ubuntu 24.04 LTS. So we don't have to go through the installation procedure. By the way, if you want to do that manually, or if you want to set up a web server somewhere else that doesn't have a pre-built Docker image, I've also made a tutorial about it. So if you want to learn more about Docker in general, also about the commands and the deployments that we're covering in this video, check it out. I will put you a link to this tutorial in the description down below. But I think most of you guys will be pretty familiar with this technology, if you're following my channel at least. And yeah, so that's what we're using in this video. And it also should be no surprise to you that we're using a small Nginx web server, also my favorite free and open source web server project. So this is what I will use to host my new website, christianlemper.de. So that will be the final name later when I'm done with all of the web projects. And we're also throwing Traefik reverse proxy in the mix. So this is also a free and open source project you can easily deploy in a Docker container. And this acts like a reverse proxy for all of your projects that you're deploying. So you can easily just forward any incoming requests using trusted TLS certificates and encrypted HTTPS connections. So when somebody opens the website in the browser, it will usually initiate an encrypted connection using HTTPS that requires TLS certificates. And the Traefik reverse proxy will terminate the TLS connection to the client, initiate a secure connection, and then forward those network requests or those HTTP requests to the actual unprotected web server. And this will be inside a local Docker network. So I think this is a very secure and comfortable way to expose any websites to the public internet and make sure that my websites are all secured and the data connection is encrypted. Now, what we also need for issuing the TLS certificates, as you might know, is a public domain that I'm managing on my public DNS provider, Cloudflare. So this is also where the DNS requests go to when somebody tries to resolve the IP address for christianlemper.de. This request goes to Cloudflare, and Cloudflare will respond with the IP address of my public cloud server. And then the user can initiate a new HTTPS connection to that IP address, where Traefik will pick up the request. Also, for issuing the trusted TLS certificates, I will use the ACME provider. This is, by the way, fully automated by the Traefik reverse proxy, also very comfortable. I've also made a separate tutorial about this component if you're new to Traefik and you want to get some more details about how to deploy and how this all works. Also, I will put you a link to this video in the description. Just to quickly explain, why did I choose Hostinger and a VPS for running my website? As I said in the beginning of the video, I just need an infrastructure that's running 24/7 with a 99% uptime regardless what I'm doing at home. But of course, there would be other possibilities to set up a website. Like on Hostinger, they also have a WordPress offering where they completely take care of running the application and managing everything. And you just need to log in and edit your website with the WordPress website builder. But honestly, I personally don't like WordPress so much. Yeah, I like to be in control what actually happens on my server and how I'm deploying and managing the different websites, because I'm planning to deploy a static website using the Hugo framework. So that's a topic for a future video. But just know that if you want to have the most flexibility when it comes to application deployments and what exactly you're running on your web server, I think you just need a virtual private server, a Linux operating system where you can go into the terminal and you can install and deploy everything on your own. Might be a bit more complicated, but as we are IT guys, I think this is just the bread and butter of what we're doing all day. And Hostinger is really a great provider. It's trusted by over 3 million customers worldwide. They have great VPS plans. So this is based on the Linux KVM system, the same KVM virtualization technology I'm using in Proxmox in my home lab, by the way. So I'm very familiar with this. They have data centers worldwide located in USA, Brazil, France, Germany. This is actually really important for me because I'm living in Germany, and of course I'd like to run my website on a German data center, so I don't like my data or my website to be shared in a different country. They also use modern hardware and technology like NVMe SSD storage and AMD EPYC processors, running on industry-leading HPE and Dell servers spread across the different continents. So that is kind of nice. They also have a fast network connection with 300 megabytes per second upload and download. So very suitable for running web servers. And they also take care of all the backups and snapshots. So they make it very easy to roll back anything when you've done something wrong. They also allow you to install many different Linux operating systems with a one-click option for your server, so you can run these Linux distributions like Ubuntu. That's my personal favorite. But you could also think about running Debian, Rocky Linux, Alma Linux, CentOS. So these are kind of the new downstream distributions of the Red Hat Enterprise Linux system when they switched CentOS to an upstream distro. So also kind of nice options, very, very common, but they also have control panels and apps. So if you're into building a web hosting service for customers or something like this, you probably want to use Plesk or cPanel. Just that you know, these require still additional licenses, so they are not free. But usually, if you're running just a website for yourself, I don't use any of these systems. I usually prefer running an operating system like Ubuntu and then install some other application using container orchestration with Docker. So that's just how I do it in my home lab, and the same way I'm using it on my Linux VPS. And the cool thing is they also have a firewall and DDoS protection built in, so you can easily set up firewall rules to deny any traffic to the SSH connection just for your public IP address, for example. We'll also go through that later because I think that's very important to secure your server. By the way, if you'd like to set up a Linux VPS on Hostinger as well, I now have a special offering for you. Just use my code LEMPA before you check out. This will get you an additional 10% off all of the plans, so make sure you don't miss that. Of course, you will find the code with a link to Hostinger in the description box down below. Once you signed up for an account and set up your payment and all of this stuff, you can go and add your new VPS to the Hostinger service offering. So, of course, I'm choosing the location in Germany. As you can see, this has the lowest latency as I'm living in the same country. And they also reduce your website carbon footprint. This data runs on 100% renewable power. It's also kind of an interesting argument to me personally. I don't know if you're interested in this, but I just can't speak for myself. I think this is actually pretty important to me, and also part of the reason why I'm choosing Hostinger. Now, when it comes to selecting the operating system, as I said, you can choose from plain operating systems or OS with panel, but I personally like to deploy the Docker application image. So this runs on an Ubuntu 24.0 for LTS server and already has Docker engine and all of the tools already installed. Let's select this plan. And then I would also recommend you to set up an SSH key. Now, what is an SSH key? You can use it to access your server's terminal securely. That uses a so-called asymmetric authentication method, which generates a private and a public key pair. So the private key remains on your device, only you should have access to it. And the public key is uploaded to your web server. So when you authenticate with your private key, the web server checks if both of these keys match. And if they do, it initiates a secure and encrypted connection, and then you can access and administrate your web server. So to quickly do that, we'll use the tool SSH Keygen to generate a new private and public key pair, which should be installed by default on your device. So I'm using a Mac, as you might have noticed, but I think it's also installed by default on any Windows machine. So you should be able to follow this in a PowerShell console as well. And on Linux, of course, it's also available. Note that in my old videos and tutorials, whenever I was using SSH keys, I always used the default algorithm RSA. And this is still secure. Yeah, even some people might say differently, but still RSA when using larger key sizes is absolutely fine. However, in recent years, there has been some development around SSH keys and algorithm. And I would recommend whenever deploying new SSH keys, using modern elliptic curve algorithms, more specifically here the ED 25519, which is much more efficient compared to RSA, especially in terms of key size and performance. And it slowly becomes the standard in TLS certificates and SSH keys as well. So with a -T ED 25519, you can just generate a new key. Now, then you can say in which file you want to save the private key. Usually by default, it will be stored in users directory.ssh and then with the name ID underscore and then the algorithm. So I will just hit enter. I already have generated such a key for testing purposes, so I'm just going to override it. And then you can also define a passphrase. So the passphrase defines when you use your SSH key to authenticate to the server, if you still have to enter a password to decrypt the private SSH key. This is for security. However, this is your personal private device. Usually nobody has access to it, and you might have a disk encryption on your laptop or something like this. I think you can still store it without a passphrase. You don't need to enter a password all the time when you try to access your server, which is part of the reason why we use SSH as well. So now that we've generated this file, again, the private key is stored in this file here, and a corresponding public key has been generated with the same name .pub at the end. And this is actually the file that we can store on the server. Because this is a public key, I can just share it with anybody, even you can see it, because this public key is only used for decrypting the packets that are encrypted with a private key. More specifically, without the private key, you cannot do anything with a public key, right? Here I can just paste the content of the file here. I can also give it a name, something like I usually add the comment that was generated at the end from the device where this key has been generated on, and then click save. All right, so you can also enable the Monarch's malware scanner that is protecting your VPS from potential threats and malicious files. I don't know much about this scanner, to be honest. I haven't really seen this in industry, but I think this is a malware scanner that is included into the hostinger's plan, so you don't need to set up ClamAV or another popular malware scanner. You already have that on board. I think this is really nice. Now we can select the plan. So I'm choosing the most popular plan, KVM2, as this offers 2 CPU cores, 8 GB of memory, a 100 GB NVMe disk space, 8 TB bandwidth, and 1 snapshot. I think this is totally sufficient. I think for a small web server, if you're just running a personal website, you don't need more. This is totally fine, right? So no, Hostinger is installing and provisioning my new Linux VPS. As you can see, it is just damn simple to set it up. In my case, it even didn't take a minute, so it's really, really fast. And now we are done, we are ready. So the first thing that I do is changing the host name and set this to the public server name that it will have later. And here in the settings menu, you can also manage additional settings like setting up the emergency mode, change and add more SSH keys, delete unnecessary logs, change DNS settings, and so on. Here in backup and monitoring, you can manage the snapshots that you can create. If you make changes, just create a snapshot before making the changes. In the security settings, you can also inspect details of the malware scanner if you got any compromised or malicious files. And you can also change the firewall settings. This is the first thing that I'd like to do because I want to secure the access to my server, because currently everybody has just access to anything on the public IP address, which doesn't necessarily have to be a problem if you have a strong password or a strong SSH key authentication. However, I'm not going to allow that on my server. I also want to keep my logs clean. And yeah, for security reasons, I think it is good to set up a firewall. By the way, hosting a firewall automatically drop any incoming traffic, which means you have to add specific accept rules for all the ports that you want to use. Anything else will be dropped. So it might happen that you lock yourself out of the server if you're doing something wrong here. But it is not really as bad as it sounds, as you can always log in and turn off the firewall and then adjust the firewall rules. Okay, so first of all, I want to give the firewall a name. I will just give it the name Firewall Production 2. And in here, you can go to edit, and then you can add firewall rules here that accept connections. First of all, I want to accept HTTP, that is a port 80. On the source, from source anywhere. So of course I need that for my public web server. So anybody should be able to reach the port 80 and for free for HTTPS. I also want to allow ICMP. Now, ICMP doesn't have a port. This is a different protocol that is used for ping requests. So when you ping the public IP address or the host name of your server, it defines if the ping request goes through to your device that can answer it back. So some web servers don't allow ping requests, but they still accept HTTP or HTTPS connections. It's up to you if you want to allow this. I think it is important for monitoring aspect, because when I want to monitor the uptime of my server, I might want to use a ping request to see if the server is still up and running. So therefore, I'm going to allow this from anywhere. So I'm going to add the rule, and also ICMP on the IPv6 protocol from anywhere. Let's just allow this. And now, when I want to access from my local device using the terminal using SSH, I also want to accept SSH on the port 22, but not for everybody, because I don't want the public internet to attempt SSH logins to my public server. I want to add a custom IP address here. So here you can add your public IP address if you got a static IP at home. If you don't, there are also some VPNs and solutions that allow you to initiate connections from inside the server. So there you don't have to add any firewall rules. So I've made some tutorials about VPNs and those kind of technologies as well on my channel. So if you are interested in, check it out. I will add you a playlist or a link to a video in the description. All right, so now I've added my firewall. If you want to enable this for your server, just click on the enable button. This will activate the firewall configuration and all the rules will be processed. So now we can test if we can still reach my server. No, there's one thing I want to do, the DNS setting. I think this is also pretty important, because I don't want to always use the IP address to connect to my server. Of course, I want to use that host name here that I've defined. When we go to the DNS manager, you can also add your public domain to Hostinger and manage it here. I'm doing this for some domains, but not for everything. So for my clcrave.de domain, for example, I'm using Cloudflare to manage this. And let me also quickly show you how that's working, because we'll need it for DNS and so on anyways. All right, so here in the Cloudflare console, I just want to create a new DNS record. I want to use an A record that is not proxied. So we will add a second DNS record for my website later that will be proxied, but not for the connection to the actual server. So here I just want to use the server production12.cloud. So this will get me the FQDN that I want to define for connecting to this server. I want to add the public IP address of the web server and turn off the proxy settings. So this is DNS only. So now let's open a new terminal and do an NS lookup on this website. You can see the DNS record already resolves to the correct IP address, so that's totally fine. And if you just open an SSH connection for the root user to this DNS name, we should be there. And here we are at my web server. All right, cool. So the first thing that we do is we want to see if all the application services and everything is up and running correctly. Let's see if Docker is installed. Yep, that's also working fine. So perfect. So the first thing that I always do is I will update all the packages on the Linux operating system. So let's refresh the packet sources and do an update. So there are a few packages that can be upgraded here. So let's just do that. So our server is updated. And the next thing is, so currently we're using the root user to log in, which doesn't have to be necessarily a problem, but I personally just don't like to use the root user to administrate my servers. I usually add a separately managed user. So therefore, I want to add a new user that I call xcat. So the name that I'm using on my local device. I will add a new strong password to it. All right, fine. So now we have the user, but the user is not an administrator user yet. So we need to use the user mod command and add the user to the group sudo and also Docker. So then my user can also manage the Docker socket. Otherwise, it does not work, and you still have to use sudo commands to do that. I will also enter the command vsudo, because somewhere here we can also define if the user or members of the admin or the root user have to use a password when entering sudo commands, and I don't like this. I want to add the word no passwd column, and yeah, that should be fine. All right, so now let's exit and save the file. So what we now need to do is we now need to copy our public SSH key to the new user as well, because currently the public SSH key is only valid for the root user. So we will use the command ssh copy ID for my user. And then I will use the server production 12.cloud.cgrave.de name. The public SSH key will be automatically added to the new server. And then we can initiate a new connection with our current user, and it should automatically work. And we can also check if we enter sudo commands like sudo apt update. We can also now run any Docker commands on this user. And I think this is, for me personally, the best way to set up the Linux operating system. There are probably more security best practices you can follow and apply, like enabling the uncomplicated firewall on Ubuntu. But honestly, because we have a firewall set up on Hostinger, we don't actually need it on the operating system, in my opinion. You could also think about disabling the root user, but I'm not gonna make this a security video. I think these are the minimum best practices that you should use to when you deployed a new Linux VPS. So now that we have all the tools ready, we have Docker and all of this stuff, we can immediately get it up and running. I will create a new directory in my users directory that I just call Nginx production 2. So here in this folder, we want to create a new Docker compose file that we can use to manage the Docker container in an easy way. By the way, I'm not going to give you an introduction to Docker right now, because I assume most people know it already. Again, if you don't, I've made a Docker tutorial series, so check it out on YouTube. This will teach you all the fundamentals you have to know. And if you want easy templates for Docker Compose, I am also managing a GitHub repository where I'm collecting any config templates for various tools and technologies like Docker Compose as well. So here you can find a huge collection of different application deployments, just like Nginx. So this is the first deployment that we use. And here in the Compose file, for example, there I have defined each and everything. So we can now use the terminal to create a new file like Vim editor when you're comfortable with that. But honestly, I prefer using Visual Studio Code as my editor, because it has a pretty cool extension here that is called Remote SSH, and I'm using it in all of my videos. So we can now just open a new connection here. Select the server in the list. Once you have that, you should see a new terminal window in here, and you can easily just open a new folder on your remote machine. This is pretty cool. So I'm just opening my users folder here. Yes, I trust everything. And then we can see here's the folder Nginx production 2. That's the same in our terminal as well. So here we can create a new compose file for Docker Compose, and I just want to paste each and everything from my template in here. We also need a config file. So if we go back to the template, you can see there is a data folder where we can put the content of our website in. And there is a config folder with a default.conf. So this is just a very minimalistic and simple configuration file for Nginx. Of course, there are many more settings for Nginx existing. So if you want to check it out on the Nginx website, there's also a beginner guide that will go through how to manage it and how the configuration file is structured, and yeah, all of the different settings here, like HTTP settings. That will give you a full documentation on how to use it. But yeah, again, I will keep it simple, so we don't actually need so many configuration settings. So this configuration file will just tell the server, hey, please open a new web server, listen on the port 80. Remember, this is the unencrypted HTTP port. The server name _, so this is a placeholder for any website name. You can add different virtual servers on Nginx for different website names and forward them to different file locations and attach different settings for the different websites. But I think when you're using container orchestration and to deploy different web services or different websites, it might be good practice to actually run a separate container for each and every website, so that you don't have to configure the Nginx container itself. Just deploy separate Nginx servers with different websites in parallel on the same server. This is how I would approach it. So I try to keep the configuration minimalistic. The location of the website is here in the user share Nginx HTML directory. The index file will be index.html. The access log I will keep on, so then I keep a log of each and every request to my website. And this configuration file, if we go back to the compose file, will be mounted in here. So it will mount the configuration file from the current project directory config default.conf in the location where the Nginx server expects it. And we will also mount the data directory. So anything that goes in this directory here, so this is where we will put our website in, will go in the containers file system user share Nginx HTML as a read-only file system. So I think that is the best way to set it up. By the way, this is currently exposing the port 80 and 443. 443 we actually don't need because we're not using HTTPS on this web server. And what might be also important is the Docker image. So this is the latest version of the image that we're using. If there is a new version, I will update my boilerplates template. But you can also just check on the Docker Hub what is the latest tag that was published for the Nginx container image on. So this is, in this case, it's 1.27.4. I'm using the Alpine image as it is a bit smaller and a bit more efficient. So maybe I want to update this version here, 1.27.4. This is the latest version here that's available. All right, so then we also have some labels for the Traefik reverse proxy. So we are not covering it yet, so I will cover it later in a few minutes. There's one other requirement that I want to take care of, and this is the Docker network. So here I'm defining a Docker network that is called front end, which is externally managed. So that means it is not generated and created in the compose file. We have to go into the terminal and create this Docker network first. So just type in Docker network, create front end, and then you have added a new network to the Docker networks that are created by default. So then your container will be attached to this network, and I think that should be fine. Of course, we need to add a small example index.html here. So I will say this is my new website. So just keep it very simple, right? And then we can go back to the terminal and type in Docker compose up -d. This will pull down the Docker image that we have defined in the compose file and start up the container. If you want to see what's happening inside the Docker container, you can just use the Docker compose logs command. So this will show you the application logs. And you can also type in Docker compose ps to see if the container is up and running and if everything is fine. So now if we make a web request, so I'm just going to open a private browser window and try to open a new connection using HTTP on the server name serverprod2 cloud.c creative.de. Let's hit enter. And as you can see, this is my website that is now served by my small container. All right, so one thing you might have noticed is that this connection is still not secure. Of course, we're using an unencrypted HTTP connection. We haven't issued trusted TLS certificates and anything like this. So this is the next task that we have to do. and set up a secure HTTPS connection to our website. So that's what I've already mentioned in the beginning of the video. We're throwing in another application or another component in the mix that is called Traefik. Of course, I've also created a boilerplate for deploying this application here. When you go to Docker Compose and go to Traefik, there you will find a config file with some config examples for several advanced configurations and a compose file. So this is the first thing that we're going to use. So let's go in here and create a new directory. So let's go in the terminal and create a new directory, Traefik production 7. And let's go into this project directory here in VS Code as well, create a new compose.yaml file, paste everything from the terminal. So I'm just going to remove a couple of unnecessary things here. In this compose file, we will deploy a new Traefik container from the version 3.3.3 image. Give it a container name Traefik, I think that's fine. We are going to expose the port 80 and port 443 for HTTPS, so we need both. And we want to add one volume here that is giving Traefik access to the Docker socket. So that is necessary for receiving the configuration files from the different container labels. And then we want to add a new config directory in here. Actually, this is something that I might want to change in the future, as I want to use a Docker volume for the certificate management. I will update my boilerplates later. So I will just use the name certs and create a new volume. And the configuration directory, this is a regular mount point in here. So let's add a new folder and copy the example configuration file from my boilerplates templates. So this is Traefik.yaml, so we can use this here. Just create this file Traefik.yaml, put everything in here. And yeah, I'm also going to remove a couple of unnecessary sections. We don't want to enable access log or the dashboard. This is not a good idea in production. What we want to enable is the redirection from HTTP to HTTPS, because I don't want anyone to use insecure HTTP connections to open my website. And now, again, I have explained this in detail in my Traefik video, so if you really want to know how that's working, go and watch the Traefik tutorial. This will go through all of the details, how to set up the Cloudflare provider, how to generate a new API token, and all of this stuff. So I'm skipping it in this video, as I've already covered it before. I'm going to remove this section. We don't need this. And yep, so I think that's all we need. One thing I just need to do is to copy the Cloudflare API token. So I'm going to use an environment variable. So I'm going to create a new file in here that I call .env, where we can define the token secret. So just put your secret API token in here. Just go to your Cloudflare dashboard, go to your profile section, profile, and then create a new API token in here. Use the added zone template. And here you can give it a name. I will just give it the name Traefik production 7 token. And here, instead of giving it the permissions for a specific zone, I want to give it the permissions to all zones, because I want to issue a TLS certificate for my different domain where I'm running my website on later. So that's why I need the permissions for all the DNS zones. Continue to summary, create token, and then you can copy the value, put it in here, and then your Traefik instance should be up and running. So one thing before we do this is we need to make some adjustments to our Nginx container, because when you try to run this besides Nginx, Nginx is still using the port 80. And when Traefik tries to use the same port, this does not work, because there can only be one service that listens on the same port on a Linux machine. So therefore, we are going to shut down the Nginx container for now. So let's switch back to the Nginx directory, take the compose project down, and then we want to remove this part here, because we don't want to expose the container port directly anymore. Again, this will be accessible through Traefik. And what we have to do here is we need to change the Traefik labels here according to our config. So here the certificate resolver is Cloudflare. So that should be the same as you have defined in the Traefik.yaml config file. here the certificate resolver that you have configured. And then you need to change the host rule name. So that will be the name of the website you want Nginx to serve. So in my case, I'm going to use a testing website. So this will not be the real name of the website later. I have to replace with the real website name, christianlampard.de, when I've put the real website content into the data directory. But for now, this testing website should just be accessible so I can see if everything is working fine. So let's go in here. Let's take the Nginx project up and go back into the Traefik container. Let's also take this up. Additional property volume is not allowed. Okay, all right. So there's a type mistake here. So I just called it volume. It should be volumes, right? Okay, so there's now pulling down the latest Traefik image, taking the container up. Let's try to open the website again. This is a certificate warning because the certificate is not trusted yet. It is the Traefik default cert. So it might take a few seconds for Traefik to issue a new trusted TLS certificate. So to see if we got any errors in here, we can just see and follow the logs here. So if there are any errors with the certificate generation and signing process, you should see it here in the error logs. But I don't see anything in here. Maybe it just takes a few minutes time. So I might just want to refresh. And now the certificate warning has gone away. You can also see it when you click on the small log icon here, show the certificate. Then you can see now I got a new TLS certificate that is issued by Let's Encrypt using the Cloudflare provider for this domain. So this is valid and trusted. We got no warning, and we also use a secure HTTPS connection to access my website. And the only thing that I now have to do when my new website is finished, I will just have to go in here to the data directory, put in the content of my static website that I'm going to develop, and change the name to christianlampard.de, and then everything will be up and running fine. Alright, so that's it about my new Linux VPS project on hosting. I hope you enjoyed this video and it helped somebody to get a better understanding on how you can set up your own small web server where you can just put a website on. And yeah, of course, as you can imagine, this is just the first part of the project series. I'm planning to do more, so the next step will be installing the new website I'm currently building with Hugo. So that's gonna take some time, of course, because yeah, I'm building this thing on my own using some HTML, CSS, and yeah, I'm not really an expert in this field, to be honest. But once I'm done with it, I'm going to make another tutorial. I think this will be a pretty cool series. But yeah, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. A big thanks goes out to all of my members and supporters, and I'm gonna catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.